we are to have a building like this that we then need to care for. So I'm going to mention a couple of windows here, and I'm going to go chronologically rather than in order of the building. So we'll do a little bit of walking around, but I hope to tell the story of the church through some of the windows that are in here. And I'm starting over at this one because this is the oldest window in the church. The building that we're in was built between 1897 and 1898, but Christ Church as a parish was founded in 1848. As Waltham was a growing industrial city, as people were leaving Boston and looking for work and expanding out, the population of Waltham was growing. And so in 1848, an Episcopal missionary thought that Waltham would be a good place to found a church. So the first Christ Church was not here. It was over on Central Street on the other side of the common. It was a wooden structure, and the window above the altar in that building was this one here, this image of Jesus as the shepherd. And the date says 1862, so it was put in shortly after the establishment of the church in 1849. So,
American Civil War.
Yes, absolutely, during the Civil War. So the church grew and grew and grew. It was very successful over there on Central Street until about the 1890s, when the parish had swelled to such size that they needed a new building. And so the process was begun to look for space where they could leave that wooden building over on Central Street and find land to build a much larger church to accommodate the parish. And so if you'll walk this way with me, I'm going to head down to just above the altar here, because this window up above the altar now really tells the story of the building of the present structure here. What is that? Sure, yeah. I understand. Got to have a little bit of caffeine. And just as an aside, this window right here, and this one over here with St. John, these are also from the original church. Both of these windows predate the building here. So those two, and then the one over there that used to hang above the altar, the three windows we have that are original to the old first Christ Church. So as I mentioned, in the 1890s, Christ Church thought about expanding. They needed a bigger building. And also at that time, as Waltham was a booming industrial city, Waltham had become a summer residence of sorts. I know it's funny to think of our city now as a place to summer away from Boston, but that was the case. There were a lot of wealthy industrial families that wanted to escape the heat and the noise pollution, the air pollution of Victorian Boston, and so they built their summer homes out here in Waltham. And one of the industrialists who did that was Robert Tree Payne. And so in the 1890s, he was a parishioner at Christ Church, and he led the movement to build this current structure. He led the charge to get the new, bigger Christ Church built. And he was no stranger to the process. He had been the chairman of the building committee at Trinity Church in Boston, which he had collaborated on with his Harvard classmate and friend Henry Hobson Richardson, who was recognized for designing and constructing Trinity Church in Boston. And Richardson also, by the way, if you've been up to Stonehurst in North Waltham, that massive stone building, well, that's Robert Tree Payne's summer home, and Richardson helped design that as well. So in the 1890s, Robert Tree Payne picked this spot to build the new Christ Church, and ground was broken in 1897. Now, he had married pretty well. He had married Lydia Lyman, who was also from a wealthy Bostonian family, and so the two of them were parishioners here. And unfortunately, when he began construction, when he led the movement to build the church in 1897, during the construction, Lydia Lyman Payne passed away. And so he really wanted to memorialize her in some very profound way in the construction of this church. So this window up here, which now sits above our altar, you can move closer if you like to see the inscription, but it says, "To the glory of God and in loving memory of Lydia Lyman Payne, given by her children." Now, Robert Tree Payne was very modest and named his children as the benefactors. His children didn't pay for it, he paid for it. But he commissioned this window to sit directly above the altar in memory of his wife who had passed away. and it was commissioned by Clayton and Bell, which was a very well-known English glass manufacturing company at the time. It's, in fact, the only window in here that was not made in the United States. This one was made in England. Clayton and Bell also did some of the windows at the chapel at Oxford, and the artists themselves, the designers, had a hand in designing the Prince Albert Memorial that Queen Victoria commissioned in London after the death of Prince Albert. So they had some pretty tangible connections to English art and English royalty, and so Robert Shreve Payne hired them to make this window. Now what's really noteworthy, besides its incredible beauty, is that if you look over on the left, the woman kneeling in red with the red robe, that is the likeness of Lydia Lyman Payne. Robert Shreve Payne really wanted his late wife to be remembered, not just in terms of the commission, but also quite literally in the window. And so he wanted his children to grow up with a sense of her looking over them as they were here at the church. So that woman in red is supposed to look almost like, but not exactly like, Lydia Lyman Payne. And so the current building that we're in, it really comes from Robert Shreve Payne's money, time, effort, and I think that's reflected in the window above the altar. Yes?
How much is the maintenance to maintain all these old windows and keep them as
well, that's a very good question. It's very expensive, and it's part of why stewardship is so important to this church. It's certainly not an easy task, and we were talking before about how today in 2010 there's far fewer stained glass artists and studios that could maintain and repair these.
Well, we have craftsmanship in the old days.
That's right.
A lot of skill.
Now, besides the, as I mentioned, besides the English window here, all the other windows were designed by American artists. And the artist that designed the majority of the windows was a gentleman named Charles Connick, who was originally from Pittsburgh, moved to Boston, and had a studio here, and did the windows in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, did the windows in the Boston University Chapel, and he did several of our windows here. And you can identify his style pretty clearly. His greatest work here is the west window in the back. And if you'll follow me back that way, I can point out some really cool stuff about that window.
And it's gorgeous. Look at
I
that.
apologize for all the walking. Like I said, I wanted to discuss chronologically. But it is one of the walkers. All right, so I mentioned that the Clayton and Bell window was very important to Robert Shreve Payne in establishing his sort of his personal touch, his memory on the building. This window here, called the West Window, because it's on the west side of the church, really pays homage to Waltham. And it's part of what makes it so unique, in that it features not just biblical and Christian symbology, but also references to Waltham's industrial character. So, exactly. So you can see the Holy Family in the center. In the bottom here, you can see famous industrialists from the Bible, Ruth and Solomon and Noah. And then in that same spirit, you also have symbols of Waltham's industries. You've got a watch escapement. That's a Metz car. There was an automobile called the Metz Automobile Company that existed here before World War I. I believe that's a bicycle wheel, a foundry ladle, and some other industrial symbols that I have no idea what they're for. But certainly if you were to look into all the different factories and industries there at Waltham, many of them are represented here. And so the theme was to incorporate what makes Waltham unique, and to really celebrate Waltham's personal and unique character in the spirit of Christian industry, surrounded by, again, all of these industrial figures from the Bible. And Charles Connick also did the windows up above. These are called clear story windows. I looked it up before I came here this morning. And although they don't feature any characters or tell any stories, they're simply decorative, but his firm designed them as well. And you can see the same color palette in the clear story windows that you can in the west window. He also did the two small windows on the side, and then his studios existed up until the 60s and the 70s, and so when the narthex was constructed, which I think was the 60s, the date is on the windows, 60s and 70s, his studio also related to those windows.
Can you tell us about the
Oh, that's right. So up above, you've got these four, this motif of the angel, the lion, the ox, and the eagle. And those are the symbolic references to the four Gospels. So you've got Matthew, who is traditionally signified as an angel or a man, Mark, who is the lion, Luke, who is the ox, and then John, who is the eagle. And that's also why in the St. John window over there, you see an eagle seated next to him. And I'm also told that that's the reason that our lectern has an eagle in reference to the Gospel of John. So the last window that I really want to point out is over here. And this window is significant not because it has any particular ties to Waltham, but because of its place in American history. If you look in the corner, the very, very bottom right-hand corner of the window, you'll see that it's signed by a glass studio that we have all heard of, which is the Tiffany Studios in New York. So this is the one confirmed Tiffany window that we have here at Christ Church. It's dated 1906, so I would assume that it was put in obviously shortly after the church was built. And you can also, by looking at it, see some of the hallmarks of the Tiffany style, the way that the light appears to be shining down. If you look carefully, you can see that a lot of the glass is double paned, so you've got a double layer to bring out the texture of some of the characters. So this window certainly very significant due to its connection to Louis Comfort Tiffany. This window over here has the same style and the same light, although it's not signed. So we don't know whether it could be a Tiffany window. It was very common for Tiffany Studios not to sign their windows, and there's lots of wonderful Tiffany windows out there that are not signed, or it could be a really good copy. So there is no record, at least that I know of or that Sarah knows of, as to the actual origin. So it could have, it could be that it was unsigned, or it could be that the church said, "Hey, we like that Tiffany window. Let's have someone make one that looks a lot like it."
That's my favorite one in my church.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful window. So that really is the story of Christ Church that you can see through the windows. Started as a small parish at the birth of the Industrial Revolution in Waltham, grew and grew and grew, and the success of that church really gave us this beautiful big structure that we are stewarding here today.
Are there any that denote the, actually, Jerry was mentioning, 14 Stations of the Cross? Are there any windows?
That is a good question. I do not know. I know that this window over here, or no, I think it's this one over here in the middle. That's called the All Saints window. Now that looks like a conic window. It's not, apparently. It's done by another American artist. And when I was doing my research, the Windows booklet that I had said All Saints window referenced in another folder. And I have no idea what that folder is. So there's apparently a story of the All Saints window that I'm not aware of. So it could be that there's some significance. Could be there's some significance to that. Because there do appear to be 14 saints in the window. Mm-hmm. 4, 8, 10. Yeah, there do appear to be 14, so there could be some reference to that as well. Does anybody have any other questions?
Well done. Thank you very much, Mike.
Quite well.
Read it to us, too.